Disney Plus was supposed to be the streaming messiah. Instead, it turned entertainment into homework. Want to watch the latest Marvel movie? Too bad. You missed 3 spinoffs, 2 cameos, and a 6-part prequel series about a side character's emotional support pet. Miss one assignment and the whole plot collapses. This isn't superhero fatigue, it's corporate burnout. Pixar, the studio that once gave us Up and Finding Nemo, is now stuck making sequels nobody asked for. Star Wars is caught in an endless cycle of nostalgia cosplay. And the live-action remakes, they're recycling their own recycling. The Lion King remake looked like National Geographic karaoke, and the upcoming Snow White caused a PR firestorm before the first trailer even dropped. For years, Disney got away with it. Wall Street worshipped Bob Iger like he was Moses parting the box office. Franchises raked in billions. The stock soared, but the cracks were always there, buried under spin-offs, sequels, and a business model that treated creativity like a subscription service.
We have to hurry up because the light attracts moths, so just squint and run.
No, I don't run.
So how did the House of Mouse become the hamster wheel? To answer that, we have to rewind to a fired Apple exec with a grudge, a creepy CGI baby that somehow won an Oscar, and the scrappy little studio that gave Disney a second life. This is the story of Pixar, the spark that made Disney unstoppable, and the deal that taught the mouse it could buy creativity instead of making it. It's 1986. Steve Jobs has just been kicked out of Apple, humiliated, rich, and itching to prove he's still the smartest guy in the room. So he buys a tiny graphics lab from George Lucas for $10 million. That lab? Pixar. At the time, they weren't making movies. They were building overpriced computers that no one wanted. But Jobs didn't see hardware. He saw a storytelling machine. Pixar had the perfect misfit squad: Ed Catmull, the computer genius, John Lasseter, a Disney animator recently fired for obsessing over CGI, and a team of nerds who believed computers could change animation forever.
It was the combination of the new medium and John really bringing a character to life that made people say, oh my God.
Their first big experiment was Tin Toy, a short film about a baby and a living toy. On paper, revolutionary. On screen, pure nightmare fuel. The baby looked like it wanted to eat your soul, but it worked. Tin Toy won Pixar an Oscar, the first for computer animation, and gave them the confidence to dream bigger, a full-length 3D movie. There was just one problem. Pixar was broke. Dreaming is free. Rendering Toy Story on a 90s computer, not so much. Enter Disney. By then, Disney's animation studio was circling the drain. Their hand-drawn films were bombing, and CEO Michael Eisner was desperate for a lifeline. The deal was simple. Disney would fund Pixar's movies and keep the characters. Pixar would do the work and get a measly 12.5% of box office revenue. John Lasseter hated it. He famously compared handing Pixar's creations to Disney as giving your children to convicted molesters. His words, not mine. But Pixar needed the money, so they signed. In 1995, Pixar unleashed Toy Story, the world's first fully 3D animated feature.
He tortures toys just for fun!
What are you doing? Get down from there!
Critics lost their minds, kids begged for Buzz Lightyear toys, and suddenly Pixar wasn't just a studio, it was the future of animation. By the late 90s, Pixar was untouchable. Toy Story had changed the entire animation industry, and follow-ups like A Bug's Life and Toy Story 2 proved it wasn't a fluke. Pixar was the cool kid. Meanwhile, Disney's own animation division was flopping harder than Goofy on ice skates. Remember Atlantis, The Lost Empire, Treasure Planet, Home on the Range? Exactly. Nobody does. But instead of admitting Pixar had saved his company, Disney CEO Michael Eisner decided he didn't even need them. His logic was basically, we're Disney, we invented animated movies. We'll just build our own Pixar. Spoiler, they couldn't. By 2004, Pixar's contract with Disney was ending, and Steve Jobs had had enough. He publicly trashed Disney, saying their partnership was dead. Eisner tried to hold his ground, but the power balance had flipped. Pixar had 3 of the most successful animated films in history, while Disney couldn't buy a hit to save its life. The feud got so toxic that Roy Disney, Walt's own nephew, staged a shareholder revolt. He literally made a campaign begging investors to vote Eisner out. Imagine being so bad at your job that the founder's family starts passing out "fire this guy" flyers. By 2005, the coup worked. Eisner was forced out. With Eisner gone, Disney needed a new captain at the wheel. Enter Bob Iger.
I argue there are some stories that have not been covered enough. Maybe because there's a belief that the audience isn't interested in them, maybe.
Smooth, polished, and way less confrontational. Iger immediately understood the obvious. Disney couldn't afford to lose Pixar. So in 2006, he bought the studio outright for $7.4 billion. Steve Jobs became Disney's largest shareholder. Pixar got creative freedom, and suddenly, the future of Disney animation was secure again. But this wasn't just about saving Pixar. Iger had discovered a formula. Why fix creativity when you can buy it? That single move turned Disney from a struggling studio into a shopping spree empire. And Pixar was just the beginning.
Your spirits can cross over. That is very important. I don't want you sneaking off to who knows where.
Pixar was the proof of concept. Bob Iger had figured out Disney's new survival strategy. Don't invent, just acquire. And once he pulled it off, he didn't stop. He went on a shopping spree that would reshape Hollywood. First up, Marvel. In 2009, Disney dropped $4 billion on a comic book company most people thought was washed. Spider-Man was stuck with Sony, the X-Men were with Fox, and the big gamble was a superhero that barely registered outside nerd circles: Iron Man. And who did they cast? Robert Downey Jr., a guy fresh off addiction scandals and basically blacklisted in Hollywood. Everyone thought Marvel's cinematic dreams were dead on arrival. Instead, Iron Man crushed, and by 2012, the Avengers made $1.5 billion. Suddenly, Marvel wasn't just a studio, it was a religion. Then in 2012, Iger doubled down with another $4 billion check, this time for Lucasfilm. Translation: Disney now owned Star Wars. Fans freaked. George Lucas handed over not only the franchise, but his outlines for a sequel trilogy. Disney looked him in the eye, smiled, and tossed them straight into the trash. Lucas later compared selling to Disney to handing his kids over to white slavers. Awkward. But investors didn't care. On paper, Disney now controlled the three biggest engines of nostalgia: Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars. To put a bow on it, 2013's Frozen exploded into one of the most profitable animated movies ever. Kids wouldn't stop singing Let It Go.
Let it go, when I rise like the break of dawn.
And parents couldn't stop handing Disney their money. By 2015, Disney wasn't just a studio anymore. It was a monopoly in mouse ears. Stock prices quadrupled, Wall Street crowned Iger a genius, and every other studio scrambled to build their own cinematic universe. Most of them failed miserably. From the outside, Disney looked invincible, but inside, the empire was already showing cracks. First, Pixar. The studio that once prided itself on originality started looking more like a sequel factory. Steve Jobs had passed away. John Lasseter, Pixar's creative poster child, got pushed out after misconduct allegations. Ed Catmull retired. The dream team was gone. And what replaced them? Finding Dory, Cars 3, Toy Story 4, movies that weren't bad, just safe.
Okay. No, you didn't. You don't even care, man. Yeah, you are a I don't care bear. You know what I'm saying?
Pixar's motto used to be original at all costs. Now it was, what if the fish had another adventure? Meanwhile, Marvel was on top of the world, but dangerously addicted to its own formula. Infinity War and Endgame were cultural earthquakes, grossing nearly $5 billion combined. But where do you go after you literally kill half the universe? The only direction left was sideways, into spinoffs, side quests, and a multiverse so messy it started to look like fan fiction with a $1 billion budget. And then there was Star Wars. Disney promised fans a brand new trilogy. What they delivered was chaos. The Force Awakens played it safe with nostalgia, and fans mostly loved it. But The Last Jedi split the fandom in half like a lightsaber through butter. Some praised it for being bold, others hated it for burning the rulebook. Even Mark Hamill publicly dragged his own character arc. By The Rise of Skywalker, the trilogy was a Frankenstein mess. Directors swapped, plots contradicted each other, and Palpatine was resurrected with all the subtlety of a bad soap opera twist. Disney's empire was still booming, but you could feel the fatigue setting in. Sequels were safe, spin-offs were everywhere, and originality was slowly dying. The machine hadn't broken yet, but it was starting to rattle. 2019 should have been Disney's victory lap. Endgame wrapped up the Marvel saga, Frozen 2 was cashing in, and the company launched Disney+, the shiny new streaming service that was supposed to eat Netflix alive. Investors cheered, fans subscribed in droves, and Bob Iger looked like the genius who'd finally made Disney untouchable. Then came the catch. To keep subscribers, you need content. Endless content. and Disney had 3 giant IP machines, Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, ready to be milked like dairy cows on steroids, so the fire hose opened. Pixar films like Soul, Luca, and Turning Red were dumped straight to streaming. No theaters, no prestige, just content to pad the library. Marvel exploded into TV with WandaVision, Loki, Falcon, and the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, each one marketed as essential viewing for the next film. Star Wars turned into the Mandalorian extended universe, quickly followed by the Book of Boba Fett, Andor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whatever else could keep Baby Yoda memes circulating. At first, fans were excited. More Marvel, more Star Wars, more Pixar, but the novelty wore off fast. The MCU became homework. You couldn't watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness without doing extra credit on WandaVision. The Marvels bombed partly because it required you to watch Ms. Marvel first, a show most audiences skipped. Star Wars spin-offs blurred together until fans weren't sure if they were watching Space Wizards or prestige cosplay. Disney had turned storytelling into an assembly line, and while the fire hose strategy kept Disney Plus afloat for a while, it drained the magic out of everything else. Movies felt less like events and more like episodes in an endless subscription bundle. By the time the pandemic faded, fans weren't enchanted. They were exhausted.
A crime against the sacred timeline. Absolutely not. You have the wrong person. Please.
By 2020, Bob Iger pulled a mic drop exit. After 15 years of empire building, he stepped down, leaving the kingdom to Bob Chapek, the guy in charge of theme parks. Investors smiled, fans shrugged, and then the pandemic hit. Worst timing imaginable. Chapek's big idea, go all in on Disney Plus. Forget theaters, forget magic. Everything was about streaming numbers. Creative freedom? Gone. Directors were blindsided as their movies got yanked from theaters and dumped online. Pixar, the crown jewel that once symbolized originality, was now relegated to content filler. Soul, Luca, and Turning Red didn't get red carpets. They got algorithm slots. Marvel collapsed under the pressure. The carefully planned saga that led to Endgame turned into a chaotic multiverse sprawl.
Terminator, Time Cop, Time After Time,
Quantum Leap,
Wrinkle in Time, Somewhere in Time,
Hot Tub Time Machine.
Hot Tub Time Machine.
Eternals landed with a thud. Ant-Man 3 fizzled. And the Marvels officially became the lowest grossing MCU film of all time. Fans weren't tired of superheroes. They were tired of doing homework. Star Wars didn't fare better. Every new project felt like an extended fan service side quest. And when Disney tried to break free with theatrical experiments, Solo bombed, reminding everyone that maybe you don't need an origin story for every background character. But the real humiliation came from the remakes. The Lion King looked like a National Geographic special with zero charm. And then came Snow White. Before filming even wrapped, lead actress Rachel Ziegler was out here roasting the original movie, calling the prince a stalker and bragging about rewriting everything. The internet turned on the film before it even had a trailer, and when it finally released, a $400 million disaster. Disney's stock tanked 50% in 2023. Fans were checked out, critics were brutal, and even shareholders were panicking. Chapek had managed to turn the most powerful entertainment empire in the world into a content graveyard. By the time Bob Iger came crawling back, the magic was gone, and the damage was everywhere. By late 2022, Disney was in free fall. Subscribers were leaving Disney Plus, box office bombs were piling up, and the company's stock had lost half its value. So the board did the only thing it could. They begged Bob Iger to come back.
Breaking overnight, a change in leadership at Disney, the parent company of ABC News. Bob Iger is returning as CEO.
Iger returned like the prodigal CEO, greeted with applause from investors who hoped he could work another miracle. His first move, Chop. 8,000 jobs gone, $7.5 billion in costs slashed, entire projects scrapped, multiple Lucasfilm spin-offs quietly disappeared, and Marvel's overstuffed release slate was gutted. Kevin Feige, Marvel's golden boy, even admitted Disney had forced them to pump out too much content too fast. The new promise? Just 2 Marvel movies a year plus a handful of shows. Translation: less homework, more events. Star Wars, meanwhile, was put on life support. Aside from spin-off series, the only theatrical moves were re-releases of older films and vague announcements of new trilogies that may or may not ever happen.
I expected more from one of the most expensive bounty hunters in the Outer Rim.
One rumor even floated Ryan Gosling as the next Jedi savior, because nothing screams a galaxy far, far away, like The Notebook. Pixar tried to claw its way back into theaters, but the damage was done. Audiences who used to treat Pixar premieres like cultural moments were now shrugging. Sequels like Lightyear tanked, proving that nostalgia alone wasn't enough. So where does that leave Disney? Trapped between the empire it built and the audience it burned out. Iger is trying to scale back, rebuild trust, and pretend the last few years were just a bad dream. But the truth is, the mouse may have finally run out of magic tricks. Because when your entire empire is built on nostalgia, what happens when the audience finally grows up? Disney used to be the studio of dreams. Now it's the studio of déjà vu. For decades, it looked unstoppable. Pixar reinvented animation. Marvel rewrote the blockbuster. Star Wars guaranteed box office dominance. But instead of nurturing creativity, Disney squeezed it dry. Sequels became strategy, spinoffs became survival, and streaming turned magic into homework. The result? A company that once built childhoods is now running on fumes.
Thank you, London. Merry Christmas.
I haven't seen my kids in like a month.
We're gonna get home for Christmas.
Disney Plus is bleeding subscribers. The MCU is collapsing under its own weight. Pixar has lost its sparkle. Star Wars has been memed into irrelevance. And the remakes, they're so lifeless they make you nostalgic for the VHS tapes gathering dust in your parents' basement. Bob Iger is back, promising to steady the ship. Fewer projects, tighter focus, cost-cutting everywhere. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Disney isn't innovating anymore. It's recycling itself over and over like a snake eating its own tail. At some point, the nostalgia runs out. And maybe that's poetic, because Walt Disney built his empire on fairy tales, stories that had already been told 1,000 times before. A century later, the company is still doing the same thing. Only now, the magic's gone and the audience knows the trick. So what's next? Another reboot, another sequel, another corporate promise that this time it'll be different. But we all know how the story ends. Disney didn't just milk the cow, it opened a whole dairy farm. And eventually, even the cow runs dry.